Welcome to Managing Sexuality Intelligently with Stephen Ng, marriage and family therapist. My name is Jason.
And my name is Steve.
And what we do here is I present a topic to Steve, which I planned ahead of time, but Steve has no idea about, and we talk about it for an hour or so. All the topics we discuss are intertwined and revolve around Steve's life's work, which involves the intelligent management of sexuality. So today we are going to be talking about monogamy and polyamory.
Ooh.
So quick refresher, if you don't know, monogamy in a very simple terms is a relationship with one partner at a time, and polyamory is a relationship with more than one partner at a time. That's
it. That's it. And then of course the modern wave is ethical polyamory, which is not keeping secrets. It's not having a string of affairs or a woman in every city that your wife doesn't know about, or a boyfriend in every city that your husband doesn't know about. It's all on the up and up, and everybody knows what's going on.
So I guess to start the conversation, what are your thoughts on this topic? I mean, we could start with one or the other, because I know there's a lot to extrapolate and discuss with all this, with these two topics. So,
well, there is so very much. And, you know, I think what I want to say at the outset is something not directly related to this, and it's directed to the people listening to this right now, that thinking about how to manage sexuality to do it intelligently is such a new idea, such a very unfamiliar idea. And I just want to commend the people who are curious how they might begin doing that. But I think it's really important for me that everyone would know that I don't feel like I've been given the answer book and know everything that one could learn from a truly informed person. But I think our goal here in these podcasts is to maybe teach the idea of being open to being wrong and just really pondering things, really thinking things over. Because there's really nobody out there who knows the right answers for everything that all of us should do. And in this discussion of polyamory and monogamy, I'm going to say some things that I think are fairly controversial, and certainly things you haven't heard before, but I'm not saying that I'm right. This is just the conclusions I've come to with my personal life experience and my professional observations with my clients. So I just wanted to get started off with that.
Yeah, that's great.
This topic came up recently for me when I was reading a book review in the New York Times. And sadly, I printed up the article and I don't have it with me right now.
I have the name of that article.
Oh, well, the book was called More, right? Yeah. Who's the author again?
It's Molly Rodden Winter, R-O-D-E-N, Rodin or Rodden.
R-O-D-E-N.
Yeah.
Okay. You can find it in, anywhere where they sell books, I'm sure. But I just have read the review, and I thought the review was rather telling, and it was very similar to my own professional experience in that the author of the review seemed very taken with the titillating aspects of a possible polyamorous lifestyle. And by titillating, I mean arousal to physical stimuli. So if you like breasts, and who doesn't? I mean, even my gay friends love breasts. If you love body parts, if you love sex, if you love sex with people, not just by yourself in a room alone and dark, if you like any of that stuff, you're going to like anything that enhances that physically, whether it's more people or prettier skin or bigger body parts that you enjoy flopping around, whatever it is, you're going to like it from a titillating point of view. The theme in today's discussion, and I'm hoping, Jason, you and I can maybe argue about this a little bit.
All right.
in a good spirit, is I am of the mind that, as I've observed, that for those of us who are big fans of sex, the best sex is made up of two ingredients: titillation plus intimacy. And intimacy is defined as the ability to safely share my life with another person. Or in this case, let's be open to persons. Maybe it is persons. The thing I've observed, if you read the review, And that author you quoted, was that the author of the book or the author of
That
the
was
article?
the book. So the article was in the Washington Post, and it's called, and the article was, "This book about open marriage is going to blow up your group chat." That was the name of the article, and that was by Kimberly Harrington.
Man, thanks for getting all those notes in there, because because every day I read those two newspapers and I can often get them conflated one with another. And this, if you read that review in the WAPO, you'll notice that it's kind of dripping with almost like a 13-year-old's level of anticipation over the titillating aspects of it, like, oh, you got the new Playboy magazine, that kind of thing. And it's hot, it's steamy, and there's a real celebration around that. And I suppose for someone who's been absolutely starved of sexual pleasure, that would be very attractive. And I understand that, and I don't judge. And so that makes sense to me. But if one is trying to build a life that includes love, and by love I don't mean mere infatuation or love at first sight, I think polyamory has some problems with it. And I think,
how dare you, Steve? You know my history. I'm a polyamorous male.
Well, you lack conviction when you say that, so I'm not going to believe it right now. But I think monogamy is a little bit like any very convoluted puzzle, and we're always encouraged by cognitive scientists to consider challenging cognitive tasks like puzzle completion, or taking care of a Rubik's Cube and putting it back in its pristine original condition with all the same colors on each side. Monogamy is challenging because the basic goal is to get all of these marital needs, relationship needs, met through one other human being. Mm-hmm. So not all your needs, for social contact. Obviously, we all still need friends. I hope that's obvious to everyone listening to this, that if you meet a prospective boyfriend or girlfriend out there, you listeners, run the other way, or at least confront them. If they don't have any friends, be very encouraging of them getting some friends, because none of us can be everything to another human being. I love my wife, and I tried to be a good boyfriend when we first met, a good husband nowadays, but I'm never going to be good as her entire social support network. There are times where she just really needs to get away and talk to some of the women in her life. And I understand that, because I feel the same way about the men in my life. But monogamy is challenging in that one is, we don't get married and married by any other name. I don't care if we're talking about people who just live together without benefit of due process and getting the government involved. But if we're going to have one mate, and we're looking at years of our life, or perhaps our entire life, we seldom begin that adventure with the idea that, well, it's okay in a year or two, and I get tired of this, I'll get a divorce. Mm-hmm. We just don't do that. We think and we say to ourselves, well, this is it. This is my life mate. I'm till death do us part. But most of the time it isn't till death do we part. It's most of the time people are splitting up. The failure rate for people trying to engage in monogamous relationships is very high. Mm-hmm. I mean, much higher than 50%. Yeah. So taking a look at how we might do that more intelligently, I think, is important, and really learning some things. Now, I'm also reading The Mating Mind by Jeffrey Miller, and he points out that research has indicated that although men and women are at opposite ends of the continuum in terms of sexual encounters, in terms of who's careful and who's casual, when either male or female individuals are thinking about partnership, they both get nearly equally picky. So he might sleep with a lot of women, and I'm not saying Jason, but perhaps Jason is an example. But if he were thinking about a partner, he would be as careful as possible. The problem when we're thinking about managing sexuality intelligently is that none of us have been taught how to think intelligently about a mate. Like 50 years ago when I was young, they were still talking about, but is she a virgin? Mm-hmm. As if that was a critical building block of having a successful relationship. Mm-hmm. And
it is for the guy's ego.
Yeah. Well, for back then, it was essential.
She's fresh right off the assembly line.
Right. Yeah. No damage at all. And like getting that new car smell. Mm-hmm. But with both men and women, we unfortunately we're not taught what to look for. And there's a simple reason for that. Hardly anybody knows what to look for. Mm-hmm. And I think science is going forward with figuring that out, because actually women are doing an amazing job of pushing the needle away from some of the older criteria toward men who are intelligent and kind. Mm-hmm. But to get a man who's intelligent and kind, women have also had to evolve to being intelligent and kind in order to identify those traits in a man. You can't pick for intelligence if you yourself are not intelligent. Mm-hmm. And what's really great about that, if you're trying to build a life together, is you have a much higher rate of success than if you're picking for big boobs or a large bank account. Yeah. Whatever criteria those are, they're not nearly as helpful as picking for intelligence and for kindness. Mm. So, and I would recommend reading The Mating Mind by Jeffrey Miller. So then when we get back to looking at polyamory, I'm going to say something that will doubtlessly piss off a lot of people who love polyamory, but it seems to me that rather than solving the problem and delaying gratification and building something that really one could find truly satisfying, what happens is kind of what happens as relayed by the reviewer in the Washington Post. The author was in a fairly dissatisfying marriage. She kind of stumbled her way into an affair. That experience was absolutely riveting, but opened the door to her to be thinking about polyamory and doing the same thing, only more intentionally, more honestly, and what fun she had. So good for her. And again, I don't think we need to waste time, looking down our nose at people who make those decisions. But it strikes me as if any of us were trying to build the perfect marriage from a guidebook authored by Dr. Frankenstein. Mm-hmm. So we're going to have this partner for this trait that I really value. After all, they're very stable. They'll make a great co-parent. But I'm going to have this partner because, they're so exciting. And we have so many recreational interests in common. And we can go skiing in Switzerland, or we'll be able to party all night. And I have this partner over here because, the scintillating, educated, intelligent conversations we have, they're just so great. We have so much in common. And you keep going down the list of traits. And really, to get all of your needs met that way, you'd probably have to have a different person for each one. And then, of course, you've exponentially increased the odds of failure in other areas because you're not attending and carefully evaluating as you were, say, in your first marriage, or in your more, let's say, in your first intelligently managed partnership. That partnership, I think, would have a much higher rate of success than assembling a crew of people to take care of your needs, kind of like the way a Hollywood star might have a makeup crew, making sure they look like the latest incarnation out of an Alien film or Predator film. So it's really challenging to think this way, and I don't say it because I'm religious. I'm just kind of voting very strongly in favor of pursuing monogamy, at least as a thinking experiment, because I think it'll make us smarter. I'm convinced it's a challenge that for us to be successful, we have to really give it a good hard think over a period of years. And, in previous podcasts, I've suggested people date at least 30 people. And I don't think that's a particularly large number. I routinely run into clients who've dated 100 people, so I don't think 30 is all of that. But what's going on there as you're dating and only dating, and when I say only dating, I mean not marrying them, is that you're learning what you like, what you don't like. You're learning about what you need, what things are going to be absolutely essential to your future life and what things aren't. And when you're doing that with 5 or 10 other people who are also doing that with 5 or 10 other people, I think that that's really impossibly confusing. It's like dating a mob. You know, I mean, there may be an attractive person here and there in the mob. And if you got them alone, you could enjoy some conversations here and there. You might even enjoy the energy of the group. But I think it's much more complex and to the point of being impossible.
Yeah.
So that's my take on it.
Well, yeah, there's a lot to talk about here. So I guess the first thing is, from my own experience, I've always been in monogamous relationships, but knew of polyamory. It was on my radar. And it wasn't until this last breakup, which was in February of 2022, where I was single and I was like, okay, I'm going to start dating. And during dating, it's like you're dating one person and then another person comes up. Maybe you have like 3 or 4, say you have 3 to 5 people you're talking to and dating. And for me, that was like, because I feel like people might need to just go through it to see, oh, am I monogamous? Am I polyamorous? Like where does that lie for me? And for me, what I realized with polyamory, like I was not in a polyamorous relationship per se, say that I was with like one partner and we were committed and she was dating other people, I was dating other people, but I was dating multiple people and other people were dating other people as well. So it felt like it was sort of a polyamorous experience that I was experiencing. And during that time, the amount of emotional energy that it took to maintain 3, 4, 5 relationships, because if you're, like you say, if you really want to have good sex and go deeper with people, you need to get an emotional connection developed and you're forming intimacy. But then when you have intimacy with 4 or 5 women, it's insane. It's like, I don't know. And then I was like, well, maybe I just don't have the love. I'm not as free as other people are. I'm not able to just, I don't know. It felt very difficult for me. And not to like talk bad about what other people do, but like personally, I think it's a personal thing that you come to. But for me, I was like, I don't think I could do this with this many people because a lot of stuff comes up and it's not just like people think it's just all fun and games. Like I have a friend who wants to explore that stuff and totally support him. And I was like, you should just date kind of like this is what I did. And it's like what I found out, it's like humans are complex. There's a lot of problems that come up. I mean, with the 4 women or however many women I was like dating at a time, all these different things came up that were complicated emotionally for them. And you got to work through it with them. And I mean, you don't have, I could be like, we're done or that, you know, but I was doing that, you know what I mean? Because that's just how I am. Because I like getting into things with people.
Yeah, I think that what we're talking about is made the more confusing when we get sloppy with the use of the word intimacy, because for so many people, intimacy means having sex or doing it. So that's not the way I'm using the term. And when you talk about having intimacy with multiple partners, I kind of got the idea you were talking about boinking.
No, well, sex was separate, but then I was forming intimate relationships. But so I was thinking then, I was like, well, maybe if I wanted to date multiple people, I have to keep it like very cut and dry, like come over at this time, we'll do, you know, and not like share each other with you. You know, it was like you had to like have some sort of boundary because otherwise it just naturally happens. Like, I don't know how not to get intimate beyond like in the way that we talk about it, not sex, but I don't know how to like to have someone sit across to me and not pick their brain and asking questions and do all that sort of stuff.
You don't know how not to be intimate. I think I heard 100,000 women swoon. I think, because intimacy is really where all the good stuff is. I think even a 13-year-old can experience joyful amounts of titillation.
Yeah.
So it's not the be all and end all. Learning how to love people is really a developmental task that's very demanding to learn. To be happy for someone, even if they're not doing what you want them to do or going where you don't want them to go with their lives, with their conversations. And I think we all deserve, just as at least in my era, we used to teach kids how to drive cars in a class called driver's ed. And the idea that sex education has somehow prepared us for relationships is utterly laughable, because we're not prepared. We have no idea what we're doing. And because we have no idea what we're doing, I think a lot of us are just running experiments, trying to figure it out. Mm-hmm. So like your friend, or who's investigating polyamory, he's really in a no man's land where he's going to be creating rules on the fly, and other people are going to be telling him what their rules are, and there's going to be all kinds of negotiating. But with dating, if you're just dating, and I'm not meaning to exclude sex, but dating is very clearly part of a recreational pattern of behavior. We date for fun. In fact, if it's not fun, then you should be dating other people. But along with the fun, we're also auditioning people for a leading role in our lives. Now, some people, we've already drawn a line through their name, right? And we know, I'm never going to marry this one. Mm-hmm. But we're dating them because they're still fun. Yeah. Or we're still getting something out of the relationship. I don't have to go to parties by myself or something like that. Mm-hmm. So, if the dating and even the sex that could come with dating is enjoyable and worth it for the people who are doing it, I don't really see any confusion or a problem there. It's when we start counting on each other and talking about, well, can she really have my back, or will he really be there for me, in the future when I need him, or how's that going to work? I think it's challenging, and I think it's hard enough with the mere thousands of variables that two people bring to a relationship, much less the exponentially larger number of variables that bringing in two or three other people can have on that relationship. So that's my take on it. I don't know if there's an hour of conversation in that without somebody yelling at me and saying I'm being judgmental and I don't understand them. But
I think we're just talking about, you could have the preference. I love to talk to someone who's doing it, but the one thing that I was going through that process and feeling all these things and working with you and learning different things about myself and dating. And it comes back to, like you say, for me at least, and again, if people are different, it's like the question is, what kind of relationship do you want? I think it's like, do you want the relationship that you're talking about, which is an intimate, deeply connected relationship with one partner that you could really go to levels with that you can't go to when you're polyamorous, I don't think.
Well, I feel really one-upped in your remark. I think that was so wise, what you just said. It really depends on what you're looking for, because I can tell you after 30 years with my wife, there is no end in sight to the depth possible, because she's constantly changing, and I'm coming up right behind her with my little changes. And as we grow older, there's this new person you have to keep getting to know. And if you like that, as you put it, if that's what you're looking for, and if that interests you, I think that can be very, very satisfying, very challenging in a fun sort of a way. And especially, again, if it's intimate, if it's truly safe to share who we are with the other person. And it's over time, what I have found is there's no end of titillation, because, let me just put it in as scientific a way as I can. the most powerful reinforcer of human behavior that we have is orgasm. And if you're having regular sex with someone you're in a truly intimate relationship with, and it's safe, you're associating intense pleasure with this person's face, a face that I've heard at least is growing older day by day. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I understand the theory of aging, mm-hmm. but like so many men, and it's become a meme, I think, for old men talking about their wives of many years, where they say their wife is even more beautiful than when they first met her. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm experiencing that in real time, and I can tell you that's really literally true. If I'm rather as surprised as anybody mm-hmm. to find that that's true, but it is.
If you have, that's huge.
Oh,
I think that's something that's like a huge.
I wish somebody had explained to me how it could be true, because mm-hmm. when those old geezers would be, on TV or being interviewed in the news talking about this, I would just roll my eyes when I was a teenager and go, yeah. Right. But maybe it wasn't true for them. Maybe they were just saying that to be politically correct, not get their throat slit that night in the bed. But for those who are enjoying intimacy, it actually is true. And so true, in fact, I would say that because sexuality itself is such a very big topic, including, of course, mate selection, which is what we're talking about, I think to get to a point where physically, if you were unable to have sex or your partner was unable to have sex in a truly intimate relationship, that isn't nearly as devastating a blow as it would be, say, to, I think, a much younger person to mm-hmm. lose their ability to have sex. I think for people who have learned what intimacy is and who have sucked deeply of the marrow of intimacy in their lives, it's really, it's very liberating. It's like there's a list in your life bucket list that gets, there's a check mark on that spot. I've learned what love is.
Yeah.
And it's so satisfying.
Yeah. I feel like it's a surrendering and a letting go of kind of all of that stuff.
Well, I don't know who you've been dating lately, but I think that's exactly it. I mean, it's because control is the opposite of, mm-hmm. What we would need to feel safe.
Yeah.
So if I'm with a partner who needs me to be different from the person I am, for example, are you going to wear that to the party? What's wrong with this? Mm-hmm. Never mind. Just get in the car. Yeah. It's like, what? I don't feel safe. I don't feel accepted. I don't feel affirmed. And I think for all of us, men and women, just finding somebody we truly like just as they are, for who they are, I think it's very exciting. I know there's a meme out there from years ago that said, men get married to women hoping they'll never change, and women marry men hoping they will. Mm. But I think people who are in love actually have discovered that which is lovable at the core of a human being. And they really are quite content to just warm their hands at that fire every day. Mm. And it's so utterly enjoyable to have that kind of safe conversation where you could just relax and truly be yourself and be heard and be accepted, even if you get teased a little bit, or, there's some mock indignation or mock horror at the politically incorrect thing you just said or the joke you just made.
Yeah.
To just be free to go forward without any censoring, to be free to think, free to feel, and free to be the sexual being that you are. I think that's certainly part of it. Mm-hmm. And if I'm with a mate who is just no longer sexually interesting to me,
yeah, and
I try to solve that problem by getting 2 or 3 other mates, or even just one really good one.
Yeah.
I think it's a juggling act that I've not seen anybody really pull off over time.
Yeah. Well, one thing that's interesting about it, I forgot what book it is, one of the main, and again, I don't want people thinking like I'm like shitting on polyamory or talking bad about it, or I don't mm-hmm. think we are. I think it's just like again, I think it's figuring out what you want. And so, and I've been thinking about it just because of dating and relationships and thinking about, well, what do I want? And another thing with it, people say, they're like, well, years ago, people were never polyamorous. They lived in groups and everyone was just having sex or whatever.
They were never monogamous, you mean?
They were never monogamous, correct.
Yeah.
So they were just doing that. And then my thinking is now it's like, yeah, that was like hundreds of years ago when we were idiots and we didn't know better and we were just not having any intelligence wrapped around it. I don't even think, like, the concept of intimacy, how you put it, was never in the thought processes of those people. So it's like they had no idea that it could have been this thing. So of course they're just going off their physical needs of having sex and wanting to have sex with multiple people and titillation, and that's what it seems to be. But that's an argument that people say about it.
It's a very different time, right? Because even say 150 years ago, there was a struggle to merely survive that involved, like, will we have enough food today to eat? Mm-hmm. And children were dropping of disease right and left. Women would die routinely in childbirth. And it wasn't unusual for an elderly man to be on his third wife because the previous two had died in childbirth. So there's that part of it. And I think, it's kind of funny because we get married for different reasons at different times. Maybe 200 years ago, you might have gotten married to a woman because she was really strong and looked like she'd be a good birther. But we've always had this capacity, at least in the last few thousand years, this capacity for love. It resonates within us. We want to be known. We want to put an end to loneliness. And only by being intimately known and knowing the other in the same way do we put an end to loneliness. But if you only live to be 35 or 45, you're probably not going to have time to figure that out.
Yeah.
Because the demands of just surviving and raising children and all that, you're not going to really have those kinds of thoughts. Again, because people weren't talking about those thoughts. And let's face it, even this conversation, not too many decades ago, it would have been scandalous to put something like this out in public because, there was so much religiosity governing our choices sexually. And thankfully, we're freeing ourselves of that. And we're more likely to really figure out what is really working for us and what isn't. So I don't think, if you look down through human history, polyamory didn't exist except as serial polygamy, where a guy, say with a lot of money, typical story, might have a mistress or 10. And the same thing would happen when people went off on long trips. I think it was Admiral, what's his name, who said, beyond Gibraltar, there are no husbands. And so, because when you sail that far from England, there's no point in adhering to these social rules. You might as well be on another planet. And I think we've experienced that. But if you're old enough to have had sex with multiple partners and to have had it consensually, and then maybe a relatively good time was had during those experiences, then you know how really empty and lonely disconnected sex can be. And I don't think that's what that's sort of a straw man argument, and I'm not trying to argue against polyamory. Mm-hmm. We're just talking about it. I think someone who is in a happily polyamorous relationship would say, well, it's not like that. We really do love each other. We really are close. Mm-hmm. And I can accept that. If somebody tells me that that's the way it is, I think I would want to get to know families that are polyamorous, though, because it's sort of like monogamy. How many monogamous relationships do any of us know about that really recommend themselves? How many marriages does the listener know about that they would like to be a part of?
Yeah, I know. It's not many. It's
like
1% of probably maybe both. So
right. It's really a low number. And that's because I think intimacy is challenging. And also, frankly, some of us humans are kind of hard to love, apparently, because whether we have multiple partners or we only have one, finding people who really love me as I am, that isn't quite as easy as one might think.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, to me, that's when somebody says they're really happy in their relationship as a counselor. I know that sometimes that gets said because they're BSing themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it gets said because they're still trying to avoid criticism from their mate who's sitting next to them in a therapy session. Sometimes they're trying to adhere to a religious standard because they don't want to admit that their religion really failed them when it came to such an important decision. We all are capable of tremendous self-deception and the deception of others around us. So, you just would want to take some time and look. And I suppose the more people who try polyamory, the more of us in the general population who will observe it. And maybe we will see some amazing relationships that look good, not just on a single encounter, but over time.
Mm-hmm.
And if that works for people, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
I would not want to get in the way of like making laws to make that illegal or something like that. I think that would be rather unnecessary to be so controlling. It just seems to me, though, that there's some value in figuring this out with one other person.
Yeah.
As we wade out more deeply into the dark, swirling waters of human sexuality and mate selection. I think it's hard enough. It's complicated enough.
Right. Yeah. And I think of it as another way that I've been thinking about it is, again, like going back to intimacy. It's like, so say you have one partner and you have all your time to develop the intimacy and to go deeper into it, and it's infinite, so it's never ending. Not like, oh, I'm going to spend 20 years with this person or whatever, a month or a year with this person to be I got everything about them and then move on. I mean, maybe with some people you do. I think maybe you need to be with a certain person who's willing to grow and evolve and change like that. But if say I'm with one person for a year, that's me devoting all my intimacy and all my time to them, and they're devoting all my intimacy and time to me. Mm-hmm. So we're definitely building deep roots and safety and security and all the stuff needed to create this sort of lasting one-on-one connection.
Presuming that you're both capable of that. Yeah.
Presuming we're both capable of that. So say I'm one person and I have 3 other women, my time alone as a human isn't going to equal out to the same amount of intimacy with that one person because it's now spaced off with 3 people. So I'm 3 times deeper with that one person than I am with the other 3. Does that math make?
I'm not sure if the math really holds up, and if that's what it is. But I was just thinking about sexual contact and getting your sexual needs met. My understanding of the marital contract, again, whether it's marriage or something else, would be that we each agree that we're going to get all of our sexual needs met through this one person. Mm-hmm. And presumably the other person is equally committed to meeting those sexual needs. But with polyamory, I'm not sure how that would work. In fact, right now I'm thinking it would be great if we could invite any polyamorous listening to this who really feel strongly about it to write in with their comments or even give us a question or two and let us know about your experience, because I think it would help inform everyone who listens to these podcasts that, what's good and what's maybe not quite so good. Maybe even we could establish a relationship over time. But if those 3 women you were involved with in that polyamorous thought experiment you were having just there a few minutes ago, Jason, if they also had another man in the relationship, so there were 4 men and 3 women.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how that would work in terms of getting our sexual needs met.
Yeah.
Because the typical American man, let's face it, when sexual intercourse is a matter not of pleasure in the marriage, but let's say of power, and people get to deprive the other person of sex in order to punish them or try to control them. And he's driving home from work, long day at the office or the factory or the mine, And he's wondering to himself, I wonder if I could get laid tonight. And he wonders that because they don't have that agreement that it'll be sex as desired, whether whoever desires it. Mm-hmm. And he gets home and, hi, honey, how you doing? And she notices he's particularly chirpy that day. And he goes in to wash up and he's particularly careful about doing that. And he's humming a tune and offering to help with dishes. And of course, she's realizing, oh, he wants to get laid, I bet. Yeah. And then she's thinking, yeah, but he wasn't very nice to me the last couple of nights. But I do want that anniversary diamond bracelet I was looking. And so there's this very performative kind of transactional analysis of whether we're going to have sexual intercourse or not. And instead of letting it just be people who love each other giving pleasure to each other. Mm-hmm. And if that's the alternative, then I'll take polyamory. Yeah. Because that just doesn't work at all. And at least I would maximize my odds by being able to roll the dice with 3 other women in the polyamorous relationship. Yeah. And let's go see if Becky or Susan or Teresa is available. And I'll be back in a few hours.
But even with that, so again, like going back to those 3, it's like you're not going to have the level of intimacy to create the best sex that you want with all 3 of them, unless you're completely open and somehow you're able to be just a free flowing person. You get what I'm saying with that?
I do. Well, I'm a therapist who loves group therapy. I've gotten a lot out of my own group therapy. And I can see how groups can meet a lot of our emotional needs when we feel safe and we've been working together over time. I'm still a bit unsure how that works with, one of the, I guess I'm holding in my mind, I just realized this in this conversation, that television show Sister Wives, which was a religious-based but consensual polyamorous relationship, and it had rules and structure, and supposedly it was set up so that everybody would get their needs met. And it just seemed, it was a good drama. It really was a good drama to watch. It was intriguing and interesting, but not something I would really want to live in. Mm-hmm. And did you ever see it?
No, I know of the name, but I've never seen it before.
Yeah, and then now there's a reality show. I think it's by the same name, Sister Wives. And it's, it just never seems attractive to me for so many reasons. Yeah. And I guess.
What are some of the reasons that you have?
Well, if you haven't already figured it out, you listeners, listening between my lines, it's, I know what it's like to be in the wrong relationship and experience the loneliness in being in a wrong relationship, and to feel even lonelier in that relationship, even when you're having sex, to where it's lonelier there than it is to be on your own by yourself. Mm-hmm. So the idea of being in a polyamorous relationship where I feel more like the lonely individual shopping at Christmas in the mall. I'm surrounded by people, but there's no intimacy. And all the songs about the spirit of the season, none of them are true in my life. That's just not going to work for me. So I think that's the big thing. And actually polyamory and polygamy is fairly common in many parts of the world, and maybe where it's the norm, maybe everybody's really happy with it, but it just but I have my doubts about that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think just the time alone is a big thing. I mean, that's time, and I think for me it's time, energy, and it's complications. But I'd love to, and I also sometimes think, I was like, well, maybe I just don't have as much love as these people have to be this completely open person. And then I'm just like, well, okay, if that's the case, then maybe that's just how I'm built, and maybe I'm just more built this way to be monogamous.
Wow, that's an interesting take on it. I don't know, for me, that it's loving, because I think I have a pretty loving nature, I love my fellow man. I love men in general, but I don't love men in the sense that I want to share a marriage with them.
But what about with their wives?
But you're married to the group.
Yeah.
You're polyamorous within the group. And it's not as though you're having maybe sex with the men. But I have talked to bisexual clients who said, no, that is their fantasy. And they've lived it a time or two.
Yeah.
And they were with a woman they loved. They were with a man they loved. And they all loved each other. And they loved each other sexually. And a good time was had by all. And again, if that's the nature of what works for someone, by all means, I don't need to control that. And I don't think we need to have laws restricting people from having relationships like that. I think that that's way too much control to give any government. So, but for me, it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
You're just too hairy.
Yeah. I could shave for you. If I could bring you in to my...
Oh, yeah. And that'd be another thing. Yeah. I have no real evaluation of the partner she would find attractive. And if I want to get together with her and he's open to that, well, that's one thing. And he may be a decent guy and everything, but doesn't mean I want to live with him or share lots of time with him.
Yeah.
But if we're in a polyamorous relationship, that might be part of the scene.
Yeah, I also think of it too. It's like I don't know, because polyamory, you're working through things in monogamous relationships as a couple, and then when you're polyamorous, you have a lot of things you're working through. Different issues. Jealousy, control, those sort of things. You're really trying to let go. So I think of it as is this a practice that people are doing in order to let go and be all with the energy and all with the source of everything.
Yeah, obviously you and I are not the ones who know because we haven't been in these relationships. And again, that's why I'd love to hear from some people who are in them and are really loving them. Or if you've tried it and it didn't work for you, I'd love to know if you think, well, it's a good idea, but just not for you, or it's a good idea that didn't work out maybe one time, but you'd really like to keep on it and go for it next time. I'd love to hear people who are experiencing that talking about it, rather than the two of us talking about something we haven't actually experienced.
Yeah. Well, I've been dating and doing it. In a way, not officially.
Oh, come on.
But it's when you're talking to, I haven't lived it, I guess. So I haven't done that. So that's true. But I definitely feel like I got a taste of it, as far as what it would be like. I'm
not going to go for the obvious joke there. But I, in terms of what you were tasting, but I think, for those of us who have dated and enjoyed dating, it's not totally unknown to date 2 or even 3 people on a single day. And that doesn't mean you're necessarily having sex with 3 people on a given day, but it could. And to the idea that each one of these dates could be fun, I could totally see it.
Yeah. But
that's keeping, in my experience so far, that's keeping them all separate. And I just can't even imagine it the other way. And perhaps that's my own paucity of imagination, that I can't even imagine it the other way. But I get, and there's another thing, I suppose, and that would be perhaps the listeners could tell me what a weakling I am, in that I do really have this part of my brain that wants to be that significant to my significant other, that I am the one.
Yeah. Maybe that's what you need to work through.
Yeah. Maybe I need to give that up, but it's so pleasurable. And there's so much that comes with that in terms of both responsibility and pleasure, that I find it something I'd be unwilling to give up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's I can see how you want that, and I can see, and to my experience too. Not that I don't think I've ever met a fully polyamorous person, or non-monogamous. They use that term as well now, because it seems like once women start getting a taste of intimacy, they want it, and
Well, I think really once men and women are more alike at this stage of development than you might think. There are always going to be those men and women who are not ready for intimacy, whether it's in a monogamous relationship or some polyamorous relationship.
Yeah.
But I think for those who are ready for intimacy, it seems to me they would default to wanting a deeper relationship that they could focus on. But again, I confess my ignorance, and I'm trying to be very open-minded about this. But I don't see how you get the feeling like that delicious feeling of knowing how significant you are in the life of your partner. Because just by definition, I mean, if you have 5 partners, you're a lot more expendable.
Yeah.
And the loss of one is not as devastating as if you were to lose 1 out of 1.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if it's like you've ruined my polyamorous dreams or.
Well, your polyamorous thoughts, I mean, don't they, in your mind, don't they tend to be more polysexual thoughts? I mean, even that word amorous.
Like sexual is like just wanting to have sex with multiple people.
Yeah. I mean, more partners, more. Okay.
Well, I think
would you rather have sex with 1 beautiful woman this month or 5 beautiful women this month?
Yeah.
And if you're a single guy and at a given stage of a young life, you probably say, well, yeah, 5 sounds great.
But that's shifting for me, I think, from doing it because it's what's lacking in the relationships is the intimacy, because you could only go so deep with these people. And if you're somebody who wants to go to these deeper levels, it's like doing it with 5 people is exhausting. It's like, to me, I mean, I just don't have the energy for it.
When you say, again, doing it with 5 people, you mean just simply being in a relationship? Or do you mean having
maintaining a relationship, having sex with the relationship, but everything that comes with the relationship? I don't think you could be having sex with them and just having, unless you have like that set up where it's like, we just have sex and our conversations are very, hey, how's your morning? Good. How's your day? And you don't really get into anything. But I feel like once you start getting into deeper subjects, that's when the intimacy starts turning on. And that's when the energies start like mixing deeper and deeper together. And then you get more entwined with one person, more entwined with another person, more entwined with another person. And it just gets kind of overwhelming, for me at least.
Yeah, I think, and I look at Hugh Hefner and what was going on at the Playboy Mansion, and he had a series of wives, but he always had many other partners. And I think he was quite open about that. And with all of them, there were no secrets, in that lifestyle. And I find that particular version of polyamory, if we could call it that, even distasteful. It's simply not interesting to me. It's like, would you rather read some really great novel that came out, or would you rather read 5 comic books?
Well, that's the thing. It's like, is it it's some sort of intellectual endeavor or something beyond that thing of just having, like, it's like, okay, dating and you're having sex, that gets old. It's like you say with people, it just becomes like wallpaper. There's no, I mean, with porn. So it's like they're watching it, just kind of the titillation. It's like all titillation. And then it's like, if you're not developing that intimacy and going deep in those places, it just doesn't become as interesting.
Well, I've done so many 12-step groups in my past for myself, Al-Anon and adult children of alcoholic groups, and a fair number of AA and NA groups. I've listened to people talk about sexuality when there was no intimacy, and for them, there was that creepy feeling of having sex, but disconnecting. And then when one of them would get sober, it felt like somebody was watching, because the sober person was watching, but they weren't really connecting again. And I don't know if you've ever had the experience of having sex multiple times with a partner you didn't care about or you didn't really like. But I have, and I've found it very conducive to impotence, in the sense that I just couldn't maintain an interest in sex.
Mm-hmm.
And that's from a guy who likes sex. I like sex. I like women. She was perfectly attractive, pleasant, in herself, but just not the right person for me.
Yeah.
And so I don't see how, as I observe this stuff, I haven't found a model yet that seems attractive.
Yeah.
To me.
Yeah. And I also think too, it's like, I think for me to even, it's like, well, what's on the menu of life? I mean, which something you say or somebody says, I'm pretty sure you, or some menu of life. So say monogamy, and you grow up your whole life thinking, hey, this looks like it sucks. It's like everyone who is in a relationship or married, like we talked about earlier, doesn't seem happy, or they have these weird games that are being played, or they're just bickering all the time, or whatever it may be. And then you're like, oh, well, polyamory, that sounds interesting. It's like, it then becomes attractive. And then it's like you kind of go on your own little journey with it. And for me, I feel like from doing the little that I did and understanding more of what I want, like, and again, I think it's whatever the individual wants. Like both of us are on the same page with that. It's like no moral judgment for whatever makes people happy. It makes them happy. But for me, after going through that little journey and having all those things, it seems, again, intimacy. And I don't think you could get as intimate with multiple partners as you ever can with one.
Is that because of the math that you
That's
did?
because of the math. That's because of the math equation that you didn't understand.
Yeah. I'm not sure intimacy is subject to the laws of mathematics, but I do think it does take time, and it takes some stick-to-itiveness. Whereas if I'm bored, let's say on a given afternoon with the partner I'm with, to go over to visit with one of my other partners who's more stimulating, or I'm overstimulated and I want to get back to the quieter one.
Yeah.
Instead of solving the conundrum of, but how can I be happy with this one? How can we negotiate boundaries in such a way that we can both live happily under the same roof? I think that's an interesting challenge and a fun one if you're with someone who's truly fun, who likes you as much as you like them. And I, based on my own experience, if I had to be critical of monogamy, I've tried it twice, and the first time it was like hell on earth, and the second time it's like heaven on earth. And I don't know what other people are experiencing, but I don't think it's in the system. I think I want to go back to your comment. I think it's about who you are and what you're looking for. Because there are people in this world who are absolutely not looking for intimacy. They prefer to avoid it. They don't want you to know their inner nature. And they certainly don't want to know yours. So,
yeah,
ouch, right? Yeah, I mean, and we can all fall in love with those people. So, whether it's, that's what I'm trying to say. I think you were right, because it's about people, not about institutions.
Yeah.
Whether it's, and that's why I don't think you're necessarily supposed to only be dating one person. I don't know who would have created that rule, but it seems to be a fairly modern rule in these times. But it was something more like the 1950s, where people, at least the Fonz, had a little black book. And, if one person was too busy to go out for a date, you'd call someone else because you wanted a date. And you wanted to go out, you wanted to go dancing, let's say, or you wanted to go to a movie with someone. And I think that's okay as long as it's working for you.
Yeah. I think that's what it is. And that's what I hope that listeners got out of the discussion. So whatever is working for you, I think that's the key.
Do you remember the movie Fight Club? I don't know if you saw it.
Yes, totally.
Well, there's a moment where Brad Pitt asks, his co-star's name escapes me right now.
Edward Norton.
Yeah. He asks him on the airplane, so how's that working for you? And it's a question that people in AA have been asking for decades of one another, whether when it comes to booze, when it comes to whatever it is they're doing to try to stay sober. So how's that working for you? And it takes, I think, a concerted effort to let go of all the shoulds and oughts and just be at peace with the truth and let the chips fall where they may. So how's that working for you? Whether you're in a monogamous relationship, a polyamorous relationship, whether you're in no relationship and just dating and enjoying that, the sexual part of that, and to ask yourself, how's that working for you? And that answer, in all of those scenarios, that answer is not a static truth that remains unchanging. It changes because everything around us is changing. We're aging. We're hopefully becoming more mature and wiser over time. And just like we outgrow certain friends when we're real young, we can outgrow girlfriends. Women can outgrow the men that they originally were attracted to. And over time, I think we can outgrow whatever institutions that we found were just absolutely essential and we couldn't live without it. So, for those who are listening to this, to be able to cultivate a detached and objective state of mind where you can just answer that question in the privacy of your own mind. How's that working for you? The way you're doing things right now, how's that working for you? And if you don't like the answer, to begin conversations either with a therapist or someone else you trust. And again, not that they'll know what you should do, but just to be able to talk and think about these things, because life's too short for any of us to be miserable and unhappy and stuck in any one answer, especially if it's not working for us.
Yeah, great. That's a great way to end. So thank you very much, Steve. And to wrap things up, we have a listener question. And if you have a question for Steve, visit steviening.com and fill out the contact form. And again, send in your questions on polyamory, educate us on it. Just contribute to the conversation. That's all we're looking for, to have like really cool, intelligent, hopefully conversations about this stuff. So here's the question. My boyfriend has a problem with initiating sex. Now that we are in post-Me Too era, he said it could be constructed as sexual harassment. He won't even talk about sex. And after listening to your podcast, I know that's a big red flag. I think his heart is in the right place. He doesn't want to be demeaning to women, but he is such a dud now in the sex department.
Oh, God.
I want to feel wanted. Where is the middle ground?
Wow. This again, great question. It's really a tough one to answer, because, you field a question like this and you really don't know what their situation is, how their sex life was, how old they are. But, if it was wonderful before, it seems rather startling that somehow out of the blue, the #MeToo movement has him questioning whether or not his wife is going to drop a dime on him and, call the police or sue him for sexual assault or sexual abuse or sexual harassment. It's a little hard to believe that it was all good before. And so if it wasn't good before, and I think we know from reading between the lines on this, I think we could all agree it couldn't have been all that great before, because he really doesn't trust her. He never achieved intimacy. It's kind of funny. It goes with this conversation that we just had. He was having sex with her fairly often, but he's either listened to some people or read some newspaper stories, and he understands that even married men can get arrested for rape. And he's terrified. But instead of talking about it with her and establishing some sort of an agreed upon protocol that where I can communicate verbally or non-verbally with my partner that I would like to have sex, and to decide ahead of time as a couple that, we're open for business 24/7. Anytime you want to have sex, that's fine. Or I don't want to have sex when, under the following conditions. So maybe it's only on certain days of the week, like the weekend or something. But, for whatever it was before, there are deeper problems. And the way she's posed the question, it sounds to me as though she's looking for a titillation answer, when actually there's what she needs is an intimacy answer. And that's much more challenging. But for some reason, it's not even on her radar yet. What would it take for you to feel safe so that we could have sex and have sex regularly and enjoyably. You know, part of the problem for men there, and this was, in a book by, years ago, one author, whose name I cannot recall right now, he referred to the penis as the barometer of safety, and that if a man didn't feel safe, he wouldn't be able to get an erection. Mm. And only if he did feel safe would he be able to, so to speak, rise to the occasion. And this individual, who's married to this writer with this great question she submitted, I think he doesn't feel safe anymore, but he has no clue how to begin talking about how he might establish a sense of safety with her. Mm-hmm. And that, for me, is a reflection of the disastrous level of sex education in this country. Yeah. We teach kids what is a penis, what is a vagina, but we don't teach them how to talk about these things.
Yeah.
And that seems just so tragic and even inhuman, because the penis isn't what makes us human, right? It's the discussion, it's the intimacy, it's the negotiating, the figuring out the boundaries. That's something humans do. Other primates don't do that. Other primates, if there's an opportunity and he's got an erection, then it's on. Mm-hmm. But in a relationship like this, what he's created and what she has tolerated is essentially an unsustainable lifestyle. And I think it's very challenging for the typical marriage and family therapist to address an issue like this, because we as a profession don't talk about sexuality enough either. So kind of a long answer, but I would suggest that they both find someone safe to talk to. Maybe even a happily married couple would be interesting. So how do you two decide when to have sex? That would be the question, or to a therapist. How do normal people decide when to have sex? Mm-hmm. How do they decide that it's safe? How do they figure out how to establish safety? And those would be the questions I would suggest they take to those conversations.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you for that answer. And thank you all for listening. And thanks, Steve.
You're welcome.